Hi everyone, thanks for joining today. I am Ankur and today I am going to tell you a story. A story about the magic that Go Runtime Scheduler does to power the concurrency in Go so efficiently. Let's but first let's look into our story timeline. We will be briefly discussing about history of operating system, multi-threading and the problem that it caused. And then we will see in details how we can achieve a high concurrency from our scheduler in incremental steps. And finally, we will look into scheduler trace and what information it conveys based upon our scheduler design discussions. To understand why there is a need to have a Go runtime scheduler and how it works, let's time travel a bit to the history of operating system and present us with a problem. So first we had a single-use operating system. Then came the batched programmed operating system. Then finally we had this multi-programmed, a variant of which we use today, also known as time-sharing machine. The main purpose of this multi-programmed system was to overlap CPU and I/O. To provide such I/O overlap and CPU overlap, we came up with two kinds of scheduling back then: per process scheduling and lightweight process scheduling, also called thread in some operating system. So on the left, you can see the number of items per process versus the number of items per thread we need to bookkeep for time sharing scheduling. So definitely it's much more efficient to use one process that contains multiple threads since process creation is time consuming and resource intensive. But then multi-threaded problem appeared, the C10K problem being the major one, which basically says how do you handle 10,000 clients simultaneously? Connection per thread does not scale, as computer will spend a lot of time in context switch rather than doing real work. So we needed something that can make our concurrency cheaper without suffering from too much overhead. So we have something known as user level thread managed entirely by the user runtime system. And kernel knows nothing about it. It's fast and efficient as switching user level thread is not much more expensive than a function call. In Go, we know it by the name of GoRoutine and is managed by the Go runtime scheduler. We add a Go keyword to start a new GoRoutine in front of a function. Let's look into one of the example. In this example, we are trying to print a I captured value in a loop over a Go routine. So let's look into one combination of output that we get from this simple program. So here is the output, right? We are looping from 0 to 10 till 10, but the output is in completely random fashion. So if we look with this one combination of output, we have two questions from these examples. How did this 11 go routine end concurrently? Was there some sort of magic? And another important one, in what order these 11 go routines ran? Now that we have two problems, let's outline our problem first. So in any scheduler, we will have to distribute these multiple Go routines over multiple operating system threads that will run on the available CPU processors, and also in what order these Go routines should run to maintain the fairness. The rest of our discussion will mostly solving these problems specific to Go design and how Go runtime scheduler solves this problem currently. As with all problem domains, we need a well-defined boundary to deal with. So let's list down our requirement. For our scheduler, it should be parallel and scalable, should be scalable to millions of Go routine per process, should be memory efficient. Why? RAM is cheap but not free. And also the system call should not cause performance degradation. Let's start modeling our core scheduler to solve these problems in incremental steps. First, we will try to see what with the basic simple scheduler. In this case, we'll have thread per go routine. What happens? We will have each thread go routine mapped to one system thread. What's the issue? We are again back to the same scalable problem. We will be suffering from too much of context switch. So it's really not scalable to millions of coroutine per process, even though it's parallel. Let's look into the hybrid model. In this model, we have in kernel threads trying to execute in coroutines. As the kernel thread is needed for actual execution of code and parallelism, but it is expensive to create, we will create in a smaller number. And on the user space, we have Go routine, that is the pure Go code, but we have full control over it. And also, since it's in the user space, it's cheap to create. But as the operating system does not know anything about the Go routine, every Go routine has a state to help scheduler knows which Go routine to run based on the Go routine state. The state information is small as compared to the kernel thread, and so the context switching of Go routine becomes very fast. So here running Go routine currently running on the kernel thread. Runnable Go routine state are Go routines waiting for kernel thread to run. Blocked Go routine state are Go routine blocked on a channel system called mutex, etc. So a Go runtime manages these Go routine as various states by multiplexing n Go routine to m kernel thread. Let's look into our simple m into n scheduler first. In this case, we have a simple global run queue, some operation, and let's say any function that spins a new Go routine, puts a new Go routine into the run queue. M kernel thread accesses this scheduler to get the Go routine to run from run queue. As multiple threads are attempting to access the same area of memory, we will lock this structure with mutex for memory access synchronization. But where is our blocked Go routine? Because in our simple diagram, we saw that this run queue contains all the Go routine that is in a runnable state. First, some operations that can be blocking for a Go routine, sending and receiving on a channel, network I/O, blocking system call, timers, mutexes. So where do we put our block Go routines? In maybe. But where to put these block Go routines? The design decision basically revolves around one fundamental principle. Block Go routines should not block the underlying kernel thread. Why? To avoid the thread context switch cost. Let's look into the channel first. Each channel has a receive queue that is used to store the block Go routines which are trying to read data from the channels. Also, each channel has a send queue that stores block Go routine that are trying to send data to the channel. What happens when this block Go routines unblock? So when unblock Go routines after channel operations is put into the run queue by the channel itself. What about the system call? We have two kinds of system call. Let's look into the first blocking system call. A system call that blocks the underlying kernel thread. So we cannot schedule any other Go routine on this thread. What happens is, because threads are needed for the system call execution, and when the coroutine is entering into the system call, we cannot schedule any other coroutine on the M1 thread. As a result, we are we have a work to do. So in this case, you can see in the run queue, we have some coroutine that are in a runnable state, but we cannot schedule any other coroutine on the M2. So we are wasting CPU cycles because we have a work to do and we are not running it. The way we can restore this parallelism level is when we are entering into system call, we can wake up another thread which will pick runnable coroutine from the run queue. So in this case, when M2 is entering into the system call, it will wake up another thread M3 that will pick the coroutine from our run queue and then the coroutines. But what happens when our system call returns? Now, if we run the M2 coroutine attached to M2 directly when the system call is finished, we have an oversubscribed scheduling. So to avoid such kind of situations when a blocking system call returns, we will not run the coroutine attached to the kernel thread returning from the blocking system call instantly. Instead, we will put into our scheduler run queue. The implication is that we will always have number of threads that will be greater than the number of cores when our program runs. Though not explicitly stated, the number of threads is greater than the number of cores in our Go program always, and all idle threads are managed by runtime to avoid too many threads. So by default, the initial setting is 10,000 thread, and any program exceeding that number will crash. You can set your own number of thread in from using the runtime debug package using set max thread functions. What about the non-blocking system call? In non-blocking system call, the coroutine are blocked on the runtime poller and the thread is released to run another coroutines. Let's look into one example. In this case of non-blocking I/O, such as HTTP calls, the first syscall that follows the previous workflow will not succeed since the resource is not yet ready, forcing Go to use a network poller and park the coroutine. Here is a partial implementation of net.read function. As you can see, on the first syscall is done and it will explicitly says the resource is not yet ready. The coroutine will park until the network poller notifies it that the resource is not ready. In this case, the kernel thread will not be blocked. Also, poller uses select KQ epoll IO CP based on the operating system to know which file descriptor is ready and will put the coroutine back into on the run queue as soon as the file descriptor is ready for reading or writing. And then we also have one sysmon OS thread that will periodically poll network if it is not polled for more than 10 milliseconds and will add any ready coroutine to the queue. Basically, all these coroutines blocked for operations on channel, mutexes, network IO, and timer have some sort of queue that helps in scheduling these coroutines. So by now we have discussed a scheduler which can have parallel execution that can handle blocking system call and as well as network IO and can handle blocking user level calls also, for example, channels. But is it scalable? Not really. Do you remember the way we have a global run queue with mutexes, right? The problem is that we will end up with some issues like overhead of cache coherency guarantee, fierce lock contention while creating, destroying, and scheduling coroutine G. One solution we can think immediately is for the distributed scheduler. In this, we have a per thread run queue. So instead of having one global run queue in from our previous model, what we will do is we will have, for each kernel thread, we will have one run queue. So the immediate benefit we can see is we have no mutex for each thread local run queue. We will still have a global run queue with mutexes used in special cases, but it does not affect any scalability. But now we have multiple run queue, local run queue, global run queues, network pooler. From where should we run our next Go routine? In Go, the poll order has been defined as follow. First, we will check local run queue. If it's empty, check the global run queue. If not, check the network pooler. And at last, do the work stealing. By now, we have some overviews of local run queue, global run queue, network pooler. Let's look into the work stealing. The gist of a work stealing is if the local work queue is empty, try stealing work from a different queue. So work stealing basically solves the problem when one thread has too much work to do and other is just sitting idle. In this case, you can see M2 run queue associated with M2 kernel thread does not have any work to do, while other queue has so much work to do. So what it will try to do is it will try to steal work from other local run queue or global run queue so that it can distribute work evenly. By now we have a scheduler that is scalable too, but there is one problem. It's not efficient. Remember the way we restored parallelism level in the blocking system call while it was entering into system call? We wake up another thread which can pick runnable Go routine from the run queue. As we can have multiple kernel thread in the system call which can be greater than number of cores. It can be 100 or 10,000. And the implication is that we can have multiple kernel thread and we will end up with a constant overhead during work stealing. It has to scan all the kernel thread idle or with Go routine running in the local run queue, both, and most of them will be empty. Same with the garbage collection, memory allocator, all will suffer from the same scan issue. Let's look into another way to model this to overcome this problem, MPN threading. We will be introducing another entity, logical processor P. Here P represents the processor which can be seen as a local scheduler running on a thread. So in this model, we always have a fixed number of P, logical processor P, and by default it to the number of logical CPU usable by the current process. So each coroutine now we'll put our local run queue inside this fixed number of logical processor P, and each coroutine G will now run on the operating system thread M that is assigned to the logical CPU P. Go will first create the different logical processor P based on the number of logical CPU on the machine and store them in a list of idle P. Then the new coroutine or coroutines ready to run will wake up a P up to distribute the work better. This P will create an M with an associated OS thread. So now that we have a fixed number of P, we will be scanning the fixed number of local run queue during the work stealing as well as during the garbage collection, memory allocation, etc. So we don't have any constant overhead. What about this system call with a fixed number of logical processor P? Go optimizes the system call whether it's blocking or not by wrapping them in a runtime. This wrapper will automatically dissociate the P from the kernel thread M when blocking system call is made and allow another thread to run on it. The blocking system call is usually encapsulated between runtime.intersys call and runtime.exit sys call. So in literal sense, you can see that before syscall is done, there are one call some function runtime.intersyscall happened, and after the system to call has exit returned, there is another call to runtime.exit syscall function. So in literal sense, some logic is executed before entering the system call, and some logic is executed after exiting the system call. So basically, blocking system call hand off the logical processor P. It dissociates the P from the kernel thread M while it is entering into the system call, and it attaches it to another kernel thread M3 that will take go routine from the run queue and run it. What happens once the system call exits? So it will try to runtime currently tries to acquire the exits MP and resume the executions. Runtime will also try to acquire a P in the idle list and resume the execution. Else runtime will put the go routine in the global queue and the associated M back to the idle list. So by now we have our scheduler that is parallel, that can handle parallel execution, that can handle blocking system call and network IO, is scalable and efficient. What about the fairness in the scheduling? Because we have multiple NQs, right? Local NQ, global NQ, network, polar. And if a go routine is runnable, it should run eventually. If not fair scheduler, we can run into issue like tail latency, live logs, some undefined behaviors. So here are the 4 typical fairness constraints in Go runtime scheduler as of now. Any Go routine running for more than 10 milliseconds is marked as preemptible. Again, this is the soft limit, but the preemption is only done at the function prologue. Go currently uses compiler inserted cooperative preemption point in function prologues. So if you have an infinite loop also, again this preemption point is 10 millisecond time slice. It's also in the soft limit, but be cautious with the infinite loop if it does not contain any function prologue. Till Go 1.13, the scheduler is not preemptive. If the loop does not contain any preemption point, they will prevent any other Go routine from running. A simple example is infinite for loop. So, but with 1.14, with signal-based preemption, this is something that Go scheduler tries to overcome. By now, we have our scheduler that is ready, that offers massive concurrency and always try to achieve maximum utilization with minimum latencies. Now that we have a fair bit of idea about Go runtime scheduler in general, how can we use it? Go provide us with a trace tool. Scheduler trace is specifically to provide insight about the behavior and debug the scalability issue related to the Go runtime scheduler. So all you need to do is run your Go program with go debug equal to set trace equal to duration environment variable to enable the scheduler trace. Duration is the period of output in millisecond. So here is one such sample output. The first number is the time since program starts. Go max procs is the current number of go max procs, that is our P. Idle processor is the number of idling processor. The rest are executing Go code. Thread is the total number of worker thread created by the scheduler. Thread can be in 3 states, either executing Go code or executing system call, or it can be idle. Idle thread is the number of idling thread, worker thread. Run queue is the length of global run queue with runnable Go routines. While the number in the square brackets like 0, 1, 0, 3 are length of per processor queues with runnable Go routines. This per processor is the fixed number of processors that we have created, and sum of all the length of global and local run queue represent the total number of Go routines available for execution. This scheduler trace is useful when a program does not scale linearly with Go max proc, or does not consume 100% of the CPU time. The ideal situation is when all processors are busy executing code and number of threads is reasonable and there is plenty of work in the all the queues and work is reasonably evenly distributed. A bad situation is when something of the above does not hold. With that, we have now seen how Go runtime schedulers provide a very convenient means for writing modern concurrent software in forms of Go routines, and how our Go scheduler runs these Go routines efficiently. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Okay, we are live. Thank you for your talk. I wondered how you come up with ideas for your talks.
It's just that coming for my own learning, everything comes from my own learning. I'm trying to get hands dirty with learning so that I can write better Go code. It's just that the problem I faced during learning Go, and I really wanted to know how things gets done behind the scene for me, so that when I am facing some issue, I know, means even when I'm writing, what sort of issue I might run into future if I have to scale the system. So in those sort of things, I try to cover. Okay, this was the issue I faced. Maybe there are some other folks who can get benefited from this. That's how I usually try to. So
Okay,
that's
and
the only simple rule.
yeah, so you covered several topics with this style of talk. What's next? What's next for you for this area?
Currently, I don't know. Means maybe I'm trying to get more towards one more thing is CRDT for currently. So go with being the distributed thing, and makes it really nice to have a CRDT system, especially if you have a distributed counting and all those things. So that's one field that I'm trying to have as equally, means depictive talk where people can understand, because it's a mathematics heavy thing. CRDT, I'm not a mathematician, so I face lots of problem trying to decipher those symbols that mathematical paper provides. So I'm trying to make it easier for me, and if it's good, maybe that's the next thing, and hopefully garbage collection, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So it doesn't look we have much questions. Actually, we don't have any questions for talk. People like, okay, I guess like everything is so clear that there are no questions. So
Or maybe there was nothing, people, for them it wasn't clear enough. That can also be the case.
Yeah, but I know I watched that.
Let's hope for the best.
Yeah, I think that was a good talk. Like, yeah, it was a great explanation, good deep dive into the internals. Okay, so we'll have a break now, and yeah, again, thank you for the talk. I will switch to Russian now.
Thank you for having me. In case in case anyone has any questions, or they want to have one-on-one, they can feel free to reach me on Twitter, or I can find. I don't think here will be that good time, but they can reach out to me on Twitter. I will be happy to answer their any queries.
Yeah, and also you can continue in chat there, or you can continue in Gopher Slack. Are you on Gopher Slack, by the way?
Gopher Slack in the Russian or
no English speaking, the main one, let's say.
Main one.
Yeah,
main one, I'm there. Feel free. Yeah, they can.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Alexa.
Okay, thank you.